Hello everyone, welcome to the physiotherapy tutorial channel. Today in the part 2 of the cell transport, we are going to discuss about the active transport. In the last video, we have discussed about the mechanism of passive transport, that is simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion and osmosis. Let's first start the difference between what exactly is the active transport and what is the passive transport. It's energy to transport the molecules in and out the cell. However, passive transport does not require any form of energy. Secondly, passive transport always transports small ions and molecules. However, active transport basically transports the large molecules. Third difference is in passive transport, the transport of the ions are always from high concentration towards the low concentration. However, in active transport, the molecules are being transported from the low concentration area to high concentration area. That means they are moving against the concentration gradient. And to move anything against the concentration gradient, you need energy in the form of ATP. And that's where the active transport comes into picture. Now, active transport, where the large molecule is being transported across the cell membrane, is via basically two processes. One majorly is via the ion pumps or the channels, and second with the help of the vesicle membranes. Ion pumps or the channel is further divided into the primary active transport, secondary active transport. Vesicles, I'll draw it over here, is basically for the large molecules. Get transported with the help of the vesicles. Now, anything which comes inside the cell is basically called as the endocytosis. And anything which goes outside the cell with the help of the vesicle, it is called as the exocytosis. Endocytosis is further of three types. The first one is the phagocytosis, where the solid molecules will be ingested inside the cell membrane. Second one, you have a pinocytosis, where the liquid molecule will be ingested inside. And the third one is the receptor mediated across the cell membrane. So active transport, we said, we divided into two: the ion channels or the pump. And the first example in active transport, we are going to consider of the most important pump, that is the sodium potassium pump, which is present in almost all the plasma membranes. Here is the diagram of the sodium potassium pumps. Now, this is the inside of the cell, so you'll see the cytosol, and you can see this as an interstitial fluid. Active transport means it will go from its low concentration to the high concentration against the concentration gradient And to move these particles or molecules against the concentration, you need a help of the energy in the form of ATP. So ATP, the molecules which is with the help of the enzyme ATPase, is going to give a tremendous energy for the molecules which are low in concentration inside the cell to transport it outside. Now this is a sodium potassium pump. In the pump you have three binding sites for the sodium and three binding sites for the potassium. Okay, so whenever you have a low concentration sodium ions inside the cell and the high concentration sodium ions outside the cell, this particular sodium ions will get transported outside the cell with the help of ATP. Now what does ATP do is, ATP will break down into ADP plus phosphate. So this particular phosphate molecule is like fuel. So it's going to go and bind over the sodium potassium pump. So this is the phosphate which has bind to the pump and the sodium ions which sit on the receptor sites. What happens when this phosphate ion gets bind? This particular pump changes its shapes. This is the first step. In second step, it opens up and this 3 sodium positive goes outside of the cell and 2 potassium ions, remember the phosphate is still here, this 2 potassium ion comes and sit over the receptor sites here. Once the potassium ions sits over the receptor sites, this phosphate ions which was bind to the pump again goes back into the cytosol. This pump again changes its shape and goes back to its original shape to throw the 2 potassium ions inside the cell. So 3 sodium ions goes outside the cell and 2 potassium ions come inside the cell. This is entirely the sodium potassium pump to basically maintain the resting potential across the membrane. So this was active because of the energy required with the help of the ATP. Now understand what is the secondary active transport. Now secondary active transport basically will do what is, it will take the help of the primary molecule and it will couple with another molecule which does not have the pump. So it will take sodium potassium pump plus a co-substance in the form of glucose, calcium or amino acid gets basically transferred or transported along with the sodium and potassium. Now what it does is, the energy in the active transport you got with the help of the ATP molecule. Here the energy is provided by the molecules which are moving from its high concentration towards the low concentration. So energy produced by the movement of these molecules from the higher concentration to the lower concentration, this particular energy is basically utilized by the co-molecules which needs to be transported from low concentration towards the high concentration, as simple as that. So the molecules which are flowing from the high concentration towards the low concentration, the energy utilized by them will be utilized further to transport some other molecule along with them from its low concentration area to the high concentration area, and that is basically your secondary active transport. Now this couple movements, like the main molecule and the co-substance, can either move in the same direction across the membrane or can move in the opposite direction. If supposingly you take an example that sodium molecules is in high concentration here and sodium molecules is low concentration here, but if we take a glucose molecule which is often transported along with the sodium, is low concentration here and high concentration here. Now active transport is always from low concentration to high concentration, but now the energy to move from the low concentration to high concentration is provided by the molecules which are moving from high to low. So this is the high sodium concentration and this is the low sodium concentration. Now it will move from high to low. So imagine the sodium is basically moving from its higher concentration outside the cell to the lower concentration inside the cell. Now whatever energy which is being utilized, it's co-utilized to bring the other substances inside the cell. Glucose will accompany the sodium to get transported from the same area to the opposite area, but from low concentration to the high concentration against the concentration gradient, using the energy via this molecule transport. When two substances moves in the same direction from outside to inside or inside to outside, these are called as a symporter in the same direction. In the same way, if the sodium is, same example, if the sodium is high here and sodium is low here, but calcium is low here and calcium is high here, what it does is sodium will anyways move from its higher concentration to the lower concentration. This particular energy which is utilized will be further utilized by the other molecule, that is calcium, but to move from the low concentration gradient to the higher concentration gradient. So this particular sodium was moving in this direction from out to in. Calcium was going against the concentration gradient from the low concentrated area to the high concentrated area. So this, when they move in the opposite direction, this is basically called as the antipolar. As simple. So when two substances move in the same direction, symporter, two substances moves in the different direction, antipolar, and this happens via the channel protein. So that's primary active transport and secondary active transport via the sodium potassium pump and via the channels.